record on this computer. Okay, so in today's exercise, we're going to cover lesson 4. And in lesson 4, they've already created all of the little illustrated objects for us. But what we're going to do is refine them, and we're going to combine and edit them using some really very, I think, sophisticated tools, but most of which are very easy to use. It's a way of taking simple objects and combining them into very complex shapes and little illustrations. So this is what the finished piece looks like. And to the right, you can see where they've created all the little individual elements down here that go into our illustration. They've done all the rest for us, and when you're done with these objects, you're just going to drag them into the finished illustration here, or the one that they've started for us. So I'm going to switch to, I'm going to move another thing around here. Let's go, okay. Go to the start file. There we go. So here's our start file. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit so we can start at the top. And if you look, I don't know if you've looked at this ahead of time, you can see that we have this little trailer to the right. And these elements here, these first 4 elements, are components to the trailer that we're going to put together and use some interesting tools to do that. Okay, and then we have the tent. And you can see that the only thing that we need to create for the tent is a little opening, a little flap. And we have a little plant that we're going to create. I'm going to do this differently than the book. I'll show you how the book does it, but I don't like how they do it. And I can be perfectly honest, for as long as I've been using Illustrator, I still have trouble doing it the way that they want it in my hand-eye coordination. We're taking and we're splitting the doors in the car. That's the only thing that we're doing there. We're taking these separate elements that they've used to create the trailer, and we're going to combine them into one shape. And we're going to take a single stroke, and we're going to turn it into a flame. Okay, so that's what we're going to do today. So let me start by doing the window, and that's the easiest one. That's one of the easiest ones. I'm going to zoom in here, and I'm going to select this white rectangle here. And what we want to do is to create, if I click over here, and let me use the group selection tool. And I'll select this shape right here. This is the shape that we're going to create. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me stop for a minute. And Adeline, see, I already forgot. She wanted to know where she could find patterns. Well, there are a handful of patterns. So let's, for example, let me make a copy of this rectangle to show you how you can add patterns to fills. You can start by looking at the swatches panel. And this is the general swatch that we have for this particular exercise. But if I go to window, or the window menu, and I come down here and we look at swatches, and then I'm going to look at patterns. So pattern options, here we go. Okay, so here's our pattern options. And then if I wanted to add patterns to this particular swatch panel, if we look at this little flyout window right down here, it's like a series of books. This is where we have libraries. So what I can do is I can pull down and I can see that I have a library of patterns. There are basic patterns, there are decorative patterns, and there are patterns from nature. Nature, foliage, all sorts of stuff, animal skins, you name it. So let's look at some basic graphics like polka dots. And when that pops up, another window shows up here. And you can see here's some basic polka dot patterns that if I want, I make sure that I have the fill selected up here. And I'm going to select from one of these and click in there. And there's my polka dot fill. And you'll notice that it's added to the library of the swatches for our particular file. And if you want to explore others, same, you go up here. You can go down again to more patterns. And let's look at some nature patterns, animal skin. Or how about that? We'll try that. I'm going to try one of these. I'll try the peacock. There you go. There's a peacock pattern. And the thing that's kind of nice is that, you know, no matter where you are, when you go ahead and you enlarge the shape, it fills with that pattern. And these patterns can get quite complicated. And in a later exercise, we'll cover how you can edit them and how you can create your own patterns and add those to your library. Okay, so that's the side. Adeline, I hope that helps you. So anyway, let's get back to the lesson. And what I want to do is to create a shape, but I started with a basic rectangle. But what I want to do is I'm going to use, and it's underneath this, there are two other tools that are underneath the eraser tool. They're the scissors and the knife. We will be using both. If I start with the scissors, what you do is you pick the point on a path and you just simply click. And what I've done is that I have cut that path. So now if I take my direct selection tool and I click on that anchor point, notice how it's changed the configuration of my shape. Okay. So here I can move each of these individual anchor points using the direct selection tool. But you'll notice here that the outline of the path doesn't continue. It's broken now because I used the scissors to cut the path to allow me to reconfigure that shape. Well, what I need to do now is I need to hold down the Shift key and click on this anchor point as well, so that I have this anchor point and this anchor point selected. And now I want to join them together. And to do that, you hit Command J for join, or if you forget, you go up to Object and you go to Path and you select Join. I think it's easier to remember Command J because I forget where half of these are in the menus myself. I have to kind of stumble around from time to time. Now you can see that path is connected. So that's all there is to this. And what we need to do next is we're going to, again, we're going to change the fill. And there you have it. Okay, we've done our the first part of our lesson here. That's all there is to it. The next one is to use the little tank, is to edit the tank for the gas tank. And if we look at the finished version, you can see that it has two colors. But if we look here, the selection tool is simply it is a simple kind of lozenge or pill-like shape. But I want to cut it into two and make it two shapes. But you'll notice that it's not cut straight across. It has a slight little curve to it. Well, the tool that we're going to use for that is not the scissors, because you cut on the path with the scissors, but we're going to use the knife tool. And to do that, you do it kind of freehand with the mouse or your touchpad, or your, if you're using a stylus on a Wacom tablet. Now I can click and drag like so, and see how it cut it across into two shapes. And so now I can select this top one, and I'll use the pink color here, and it's two separate shapes now. I cut it across, but it's more free-form shape. And now I can go ahead and I can move this one into place. And if you want to make sure that it just moves straight down and it doesn't slide to the left or right, hold down the Shift key. And that will lock it into position. And then in each instance, I should probably be selecting all of them and grouping them so that when you join them later on and put them together into the finished little illustrations, that they'll work together nicely. So I'm going to go ahead and Command J to join. Another thing, I don't know how many of you are using the PC, but when I say that I'm using the Command key, that's because I'm on a Macintosh. If you're on a PC, that would be the Control key. Right. So, and I think I have a question here in the chat. Hold on here. Oh, okay. Adeline's got it. Never mind. Never mind. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to add the little flap in the tent. And again, we're going to use the same tool that we used for this, but a little bit different. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select this shape right here, the little triangle that represents the opening of the tent. And I'm going to use, again, the knife tool. But if I wanted to cut straight, you know, vertical, then what I need to do is I need to hold down the Shift key as I'm using it. And as I click and I drag, nope, I'm mistaken. Hold on. Is it the Alt key? I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. The Alt and the Command key. And that cuts it vertically. Usually when you want to constrain the directions, it's the Shift key. This is a little bit different though. Why? I guess, you know, they had to do that. Again, to hold down the Alt key and the Command key. No, the Alt key. And click and drag, and now hold down the Command key. No, Shift key. I'm goofing up here again. It's the Alt key and then the Shift key. So I'm going to do it a third time. Okay, I hold down the Alt key and drag. Notice that it can go at an angle. As I hold down the Shift key, it constrains the direction. So they're still using the Shift key to constrain. And when I let go, you can see that it's cut it in half now. So now I want to cut it this one again. But I want it to be a straight line, but in a slightly different direction. So I use the, not vertical. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use the knife tool again. And I'm going to move over and I'm going to hold down the Alt key and click and drag. And now you can see that I can, you know, cut this in half again. But it's at an angle. It's straight, but it's not a wavy line, but it's a straight line. And so now I have this shape here that I can select. And I'll fill that with yellow. There you go. Okay, so I goofed a little bit, but again, it's getting acclimated to the key commands for the added functionality of the knife tool. It's not a tool that I use very often, but when you do need it, it can be very handy. The next one I have here is we're going to create this little piece right here. And we're starting with a path. And this is something that we did the other day. We turned a path into a shape. So to do that, you select the path and you go to Edit and you go to, you go to Object and you go to Path and you say Outline Stroke. And that becomes now a rectangular shape. And what they want us to do is to use the eraser tool to create that shape. And one little fell swoop, we're supposed to do that. And look at mine, looks horrible. It's abominable. So I'm going to show you a different way by leaving it as a path. This would be my preferred way of doing this. Now with the path selected, you'll notice at the top, it says that we have a basic path, which is what we want. And you'll notice that it's a uniform selection. But if I click on this tab here, you'll notice that there's different configurations that we can make. And we can also do our own. I want this one. Look at that. It's already perfectly symmetrical. And now what I can do is I can zoom in a little bit. And you'll notice that the ends of each of these are not, they're truncated. They don't come to a point. So if I use a different tool, if I use the, where is it? There we go. It's the width tool. And I move over the end point and I click and I drag just a little bit. There we go. I can pull that out just a little bit. And again, I'll click over the bottom one and I'll pull it out just a little bit. And there you have it. So now I have, and if I want to come back and edit further, I can. I can go back over that end and pull that out just a little bit more. So there you have it. That's a much easier way and a much more accurate way of creating a shape. And if you choose, if you want to make it, turn it into, it is a shape, but it's still a path. So instead of making a path, if I want to turn it into a shape, I can go to Object, Path, and I can say that I want to outline stroke. You notice it automatically creates all the anchor points for us. I'll move it into place, hold down the Shift key to constrain the movement. Move this down like so. And if I need to change the width of it, I can hold down the Option key, make it a little bit narrower. So it's much easier to configure that way. So that would be my preferred way of working. And again, when we're all done, I'll select them all. And we're going to go ahead and hit Command G to group them. So now it functions as a single shape. I'm going to zoom out. What are we working on next? Oh, we got the wheel for our, let's zoom out. So the next thing we want to do is to make the tire for the trailer. And you'll notice that we're using 3 shapes to do that. I'm going to click on this shape and move it over here just to get it into position. And I'm going to take this one, and it needs to be on the very top, and I want to move it in right on top of it. And let me make sure that I have under View, I don't have Smart Guides turned on. I want Smart Guides turned on. So that when I move this into position, notice the little pink lines? It tells me when I have it centered. And there you go. I know without having to make any measurements that both of these, in fact, both the circle, the concentric circle and the outer circle are perfectly aligned. Now what I can do is I want to cut a hole through the little purple circle there. So I'll make sure that both of them are selected. And then I'm going to go to Object up here. Oops. There we go, Object. And I want to make a compound path. Compound path, make. And as soon as I do, notice that it cuts a hole through it. And if we were to look at that, and I suggest that you do that, look at that shape in the layers panel, and you'll see that it treats this shape differently now. Now I can move it into position. And again, using there we go. Now it's perfectly aligned. Again, I find that very Smart Guides really, really helpful. So that without any measurement, you can put it together really very quickly and very accurately. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to work on the camper itself. And we're going to take all of these individual elements. You can see they're just outlined shapes, but there's a bunch of them here. So what I want to do is I want to select all of them. And I want to begin joining them together. So for them, it was much easier rather than using the pen tool or using the shaper tool or using others, but just simple geometric shapes to begin piecing together kind of like a jigsaw puzzle, this camper. So now what I want to do to join them together is, and I showed you this the other day briefly, I'm going to use the shape builder tool. And it is extremely powerful. So now what I can do by selecting it is that I want to join them together. So I'm going to select and I'm just going to click and drag. And as I do, you'll notice, whoa, I don't want to do that. I may have had something else selected by mistake. There we go. So I'm going to try again. Use the shape builder tool, click and drag across. And as I do that, notice that it joins them all together. And I'll take these and I'll join these together. Actually, I don't want to do that. Let me undo that. Because notice that it did that. I'm going to remove this little corner point here. So I'll hold down the Option key and click. And that removes that one. So as I come back in here, if I click on these individual parts, I can add all of those. This is going a little bit more clunky than I had imagined. So I'm going to go back again. Let's go there. So let me try again. I'm going to click and drag. And it doesn't want to, shoot, I don't know why it's doing that. Let me go ahead and I'm going to do it a little bit differently than the books. I'm going to take all of these shapes and I'm going to flip and make sure that they all have a fill. So let me go back here and I'm going to make sure that they all have a black fill. It might be easier to do and make sure that they have no stroke at all. There you go. So now again, I'm going to make sure that they're all selected. We can see that they're selected. And now I can use Shape Builder tool and click and drag across. And it still has this little piece here that I don't understand. I'll hold down the Option key and I'll remove this one. I'm going to click and drag across, add that. And these are all selected now. Now what I need to do is I need to get rid of this piece down here. So to do that, I need to select the wheel shape and I need to select the shape that I created for the trailer. And now I want to subtract the wheel shape from that. I also need to select this bottom shape as well. So let's select them all again. There we go. So now I'll use the Shape Builder tool and I'm going to hold down the Option key and I'm going to click. Whoops. Let's go ahead and Option. And that's not working here. Why is it that it's not working here? Oh, I'm going to take this and instead of, I'm going to make this a black fill too, just to make it simple. So sometimes it works when when you have outline strokes, sometimes this doesn't work that well. So let me go ahead and take the outline off of it. There we go. So let me make sure that these shapes are all selected again. And now I'll use the Shape Builder tool. And I want to go ahead and hold down the Option key. Whoops, wrong tool. Shape Builder, there we go. Hold down the Option key and I want to remove it. And there you go, done. I'll go ahead and I'll select this shape again. Are these separate shapes? They might be. Let's go ahead and take that. Let's use the Shape Builder tool to join them together. There you go. So now it's just one shape. So if you want to combine the shapes, make sure that they're first selected and hit and just click and drag across. If you want to remove pieces of them, you need to hold down the Option key with the shapes that you want and then click to remove them. It wouldn't hurt for me to do this one again. I'm going to go ahead and do it again. It's going to undo, go back to all these shapes. And again, they provided the outline, and I think that proves to be a problem. So what I'm going to do instead is for the outline, I'm going to select none for all of them. But for the fill, I'm going to just go ahead and, it's going to be pink when we're done anyway. So let's go ahead and make it a pink fill. Okay, so all the shapes that we want, except for the wheel and the bottom little purple shape, have been selected. And if you forget how to do that, just click and drag across all of them like so. Now let's go ahead and use the Shape Builder tool, and I want to begin joining them together. So as I click and I drag across them and they highlight, notice that they join together. This little piece over here, I want to remove. So I hold down the Option key and I click, and that removes it. I want to join all the rest of these together. So I simply click and I drag across them all. And then I want to join these together, so I drag them across. Now it's one shape. Okay. Now I'll go ahead and I'm going to take, and I'm going to select these shapes, the one that we just joined together, the base of our trailer, and the wheel. And now I want to subtract. So I hold down the Option key, and I click and I drag across, and boom, the wheel well has been generated. A very quick and efficient way, although it's taken me a couple of tries to do it, quickly. It works very nicely. Okie doke. So we have most of our trailer parts done. The next one is to do the door. So let's see where the door is. There we go. Zoom in on the door. Likewise, they start with those simple outline shapes, and I don't like that, but I'm going to move this one into position first. So again, to accurately position this one over, or the rectangle, the circle over the rectangle, make sure that you have under view, that you have smart guides turned on. And as I move it down, you can see that where the center aligns and the edges align, that's where I want it to be. Okay, so I'll do that again. I'm going to go ahead and move it down. I can hold down Shift key and make sure that it's a vertical move. And when I see the intersection, and you can see now that it's perfectly aligned. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to flip again by using the little flip. And then I'm going to select the stroke. And I don't want a stroke at all because that will cause problems when I combine them together. Come on. There we go. We'll go ahead and I'll flip that one as well. Okay, so now I want to join these two parts together to create the shape of the door. So I use the Shape Builder tool and make sure that they're both, before I do, make sure that both of the shapes are selected. And now I go back to the Shape Builder tool and I click and I drag across. Now it's one shape. And to show exactly that it is one shape, if I turn off preview and I hit Command Y, see that? All one shape. So it's very easy to take, two basic primitives, a circle and a rectangle, and to join them together. Or in the case of what we did with the trailer parts, the same thing. Start with basic primitive shapes, circles, ellipses, rectangles, and so on, and then combine them or eliminate parts of them. It works very nicely. Command Y to bring it back. And now I guess with that one selected, I want to make it the pink. So let's go ahead and bring up our swatches. And is it a darker pink? I guess the other one, this is the lighter pink. So there we go. This one should be the darker pink. So I'll select this one, and I'll make it the darker pink. There we go. Okay, so we're just making all of our pieces. We don't have much more to go for this particular lesson. The next is, let's go ahead and do the door. That's an easy one. Because you can see that at the very end, we have two doors that have been created here. It'd be easier if I use the group selection tool. I'll show you here. If I select this shape, this one, we have two rectangles. But the way they started making the car shape is that this, in fact, is one rectangle. But I want to divide it into two. So another way of doing that, I could, as we did at the beginning, I could use the, which tool was it? It was, I could use the scissors tool, but instead this time we're going to use the eraser tool. So I want to make sure that I have a small size eraser. To determine the size of it, to change the size of it, an easy way is to hit the right bracket key. The bracket keys are the two keys to the right of your P key. And they say that they want it to be maybe 5 pixels. And if I move it into position here, like so, hold down the shift key and drag like so. And there you go. There are your two shapes. Very simple. Just cuts it right in half. If you want to poke holes in objects, that would be another way of doing that too. There are multiple ways of doing the same thing. So they're using the eraser tool now to take one shape and change it into. Remember that, though, that you need to, if you only want it to affect one shape, it needs to be selected first. And the last one that we're going to do, that's to create the little flame piece. Okay. So where's our flame? There it is over here. This is a little different. This is, we're going to use what I used for that little bush over there. We're going to use the tool that allows us to, the width tool that allows us to change the width. But before I do, I want to take this straight line and I want to curve it. So to do that, I'm going to use the curvature tool. And before I forget, I wanted to let you know that on Monday, instead of covering lesson 5, I will be covering lesson 6. And then on Wednesday, I'll be covering lesson 5. They're both important, but I think learning about the pen tool and the curvature tool are more important, especially while you're working on your mask assignment. Well, now I can take this straight line with a curvature tool, and I can click on it and I can move it like so. Notice how it makes it kind of bow. Now I can take and I can click up here and I can drag it and I can move it back. So now I have a nice little curvy line without much muss or fuss. But you'll notice that it's just a simple path that I want to now affect the width of it. And that's where the path width tool comes into effect. I'm going to move over the center of it, and I'm going to click and drag and pull it out. And notice that when you do that, it gets fatter where I pull that out, and it remains narrow at each end. I can continue to pull on it like so, get it as fat as I want it. But you'll notice that they're not quite pointy at the end. But if I zoom in and I look at the very end here, I can take, and I'm going to take these and I'm going to pull them in. Again, using the width tool. And it comes to a nice tapered point. similar to what I did with the bush. But now I'm bringing it together so that it's a nice point. Now, if you choose, you can leave it as a path, or you can choose to outline it if you wish. Either way will work. What I get in the habit of doing is I like working non-destructively. And I know for those of you who've had me for Photoshop, that's a really big deal for me. So what I tend to do, if it's taken me a long time to create a shape or manipulate a path or whatever, I will make a copy of it first. Just hold down the Option key, Alt key, whatever you want to call it, and make a copy of it. And now with the copy, I'll go back to Object and I'll go to Path, and I'll say that I want to outline stroke. Now that it's outlined, I can make a copy of it, and I can make the other shapes that I need for my the remainder of my piece. So we have one down here. So I'm going to go ahead and hold down the Option key and make a copy of that. I'm going to go ahead and hold down Shift Option to make a little tiny version of that. And I'll move that into position like so. And I'll do the same for this one, but this one has been flipped. So what tool do I use to flip that? We use the mirror tool, or as they call it, the reflect tool here. But before I do, I'll go ahead and I'll make a copy of this one. I'll hold down the Option key, Alt key, make a copy. And I guess I can go ahead and I can shrink it down, or I can go ahead and I can flip it here. I'll just flip it right now. So I'll take the reflect right in the middle. I'm going to go ahead and hold down the Option key, click, and I want it to flip about the vertical. And I can look at the preview and you can see the difference. And in this particular instance, I don't want a copy of it. I'm just going to go ahead and click OK. And then with the selection tool, I'll go ahead and I'll hold down the Shift and Option key, and then from the corner, I'll make a little bit smaller version of it and move it into position. And there you have it. And I guess I can go ahead and I can select them all and hit Command G to group. So those are all of our parts. And now all we have to do is to put all the pieces together. So you might want to take the one that we made here and put the wheel in position. All right. We might want to take the window and put it into position over here, right here. You might want to take the door. Where's our door? Door. There it is. Did I group that together? I don't know if I did. And we'll move it into position. And I'll clean up the arrangement of that in a minute. Whoops, wrong place. This one goes over here. This one goes over here. And we take the little tank and we put that into position. Oh, I thought I grouped them together. I guess I didn't. So select them all and hit Command G to group. And remember, even though that these are grouped, you can always go back in and you can change the position of them. Now, I forgot to group this one. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to bring it back. There we go. And I'll select them all and I'll group it. There we go. Let's move that back over. There you have it. So I think I have all the pieces together. And this has not been grouped, so I guess I should group all of those. So Command G, group. And I group that. And let's group all the parts of the car. Make sure that that's grouped together if I haven't already done so. And now we can just take and move them over. Okay. So I probably should look at the finished version here to see where all these parts go. And we can start by just moving at the top here. Let's move the trailer over. didn't group the tires together. My. Select that one and this one and group. Now let's move it over. I still have parts here that are not grouped together. I don't know what happened here. Let me take this and say, I've made a mistake here. You can see it's covering up the bottom part. So I'm just going to send it backwards. Let me just say object arrange and send back. There we go. Now let's move this into position a little bit better. And let's make sure that I have all the parts selected and group them. There we go. So as you can see, if you forget to group or you don't do it correctly, it's easy to just move little bits and pieces and then you have to rearrange them again and that sort of thing. Let's move this one together. Let's go ahead and we don't need to move the bush, but I do need to move this over here with this. And they've already created the flame and the fire for us. So I'll go ahead and I'll group all of these together. And I'll move it over. You know, take note. This is typically how you construct an illustration. It's kind of like a little jigsaw puzzle. You know, you can do it in pieces and then put the pieces together at the very end, as I've done here. And before you know it, we have a little illustration, somewhat stylized and flat, two-dimensional, very graphic. I think this is one of the nicer illustrations that they've created. So this didn't take as long today. Oh, there is a little tool that I wanted to talk about that I tried to do the other day and I screwed up. So there are different ways of select or deselecting objects. So for example, let me take this and I'm going to ungroup it for a minute just to show you what happens. So I have all ungroup again. Object, Shift Command G. There we go. So now it's comprised of all of its individual elements. And sometimes when you select or you want to deselect, it's easy to select this shape, but if I move off of it and I just click to deselect it, I've deselected this shape. And notice, you know, I've inadvertently selected another shape in its place, and I don't want to do that. Okay. So instead, if I select it and I want to deselect it, if I hold down the Shift Command key and click directly on it, it deselects it. Got that? If I select it and I hold down the Shift Command key and click on it, it deselects it. So that's another quick way. And I don't usually do that. I typically click here and move off of it and just deselect. But that's another way of deselecting everything. Individual objects. But as you can see that sometimes these illustrations can get quite complicated, you know, complex, with a lot of overlapping shapes. And you may inadvertently move things that you don't mean to, or select or deselect things that you don't mean to. And you know, that's another way of attacking the problem. Now, when I grouped some of these, I kind of grouped, I nested some groups inside of another. And I would probably want to go back and clean that up. And how do I know that I've done that? The only way that you would know that is, for example, if I were to click and drag this across, hold down the Option key to make a copy of it. And with this object selected, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to look at layers and see how this is constructed. Okay, so here's our working layer. And I'm going to twirl down to see what's been selected, and you'll see that this is part of a group. In fact, we have a bunch of trailers that are all grouped together. But the one that's selected, the one right here, if I twirl down on that, okay, there may be a group inside of it. Okay. And in fact, there is. I have the trailer with the wheel. So there's a group within a group that's been nested right here. And if I twirl down on that, you can see that these shapes were grouped before I grouped everything else together. So if that bothers you, what you can do is I can select just this group and I can ungroup it, okay? So that would be Shift Command U to ungroup. Right? Let's try again. Select it again. Object, ungroup. There we go. So I'm going to leave the wheel grouped together. But what I can do is you can see that it is ungrouped, but it lies outside of the shape that I have now. So I can move those inside of the group. Actually, no, it did leave it inside there. So now when I select here, yeah, it's all part of one group, but I have not nested it. But if it did lie outside of that group, I could just simply click on the shape and drag it back inside to that little group that I had created. Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing and see if there are any questions you have for me. Yeah, for those of you who are here, let me, before I end my recording today, I want to see who else is here. I have Adeline, Ashley, Emily, Malik, Natalie, Duenas, So-Young Ho, Gal, and we have Susie and Vanessa Perry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. Yeah, 8. Okay. No questions from anybody? Are these? There is one. Let me go ahead and see. When is the mass project due? Ideally, I would like it due by the end of next week. Okay. So that we can spend the next 2 weeks working on the next assignment, and then the last 2 weeks working on the final assignment, along with the lessons. Does that help everybody? Okay. Now, if it takes you longer to do it, fine, but that just means that you have less time to do the others. It's up to you to organize your time. My syllabus and my weekly syllabus is basically a guide for you to follow. And if you can adhere to it, I think you'll have less stress and fewer issues in completing the course and the lessons and the assignments. But if you need extra time, or you're going on vacation, or you get sick or whatever, and you need to take more time on a particular lesson, then, do what you need to do. We're done within the hour today. How about that? So again, I repeat, on Monday, I'm going to cover lesson 6, not lesson 5. And it's a very important lesson because it covers the pen tool, and as well as the curvature tool. these tools right here. And for the longest time, well, you couldn't see. You're over to the left, just above the T tool, the type. And for the longest time, they were the core of Illustrator. But since they've built additional tools, like the Shape Builder tool in particular, it's become less important. And I think for the better. Not that the pen tool isn't still useful for creating complex compound curves, but if you can do it with basic shapes and use the Shape Builder tool to construct a more accurate version of what you're attempting to achieve, then that would be my choice. I think the Curvature tool too is a nice addition as well. It doesn't take the place of the pen tool, but sometimes I use both of them together, and to get the desired results, to get nice smooth curves, and yeah, that are not that are really elegant when they're formed and aesthetically pleasing. So the combination of those two tools work together very nicely. Okay. So if there aren't any questions, we can end now, or I will hang in there for a few minutes. And that's it. Have a nice weekend, everybody. And I hope to see everybody again on Monday. Yeah, bye-bye. Okay, yeah, have a good weekend.
Bye. Thank you.
Uh-huh.